It's a Tuesday edition here on Zero Blog 30, and today we only have one round in the magazine. We're going to be talking a lot about the Iraq War. It's been the 20-year anniversary of what's been going on there and what's happened there. I've gone through a lot of information, been reading a lot more than I did. I mean, I'll be honest, when it was 2004, 2003, and I was entering the Marine Corps and I was ready to go to war, I didn't read anything about it. I just knew what was on TV. I knew that the president of the United States said it was time to go. I knew that the international community was largely behind it. So I was like, what research do I need to do? I'm fucking 23 years old. I don't know about any of this shit. And at the
but
time,
I know everything about everything else.
Right. The internet is not the way it is. Or was
No.
then. You didn't have like individual blogs, individual social media accounts, individual people that you grow to trust. It was mainstream media, MSN, Hotmail, fucking Yahoo.
But also, too, you forget the vibe at the time was if you questioned anything, you were anti-American, buddy.
Big time.
This was all about avenging 9/11 and
Iraq,
the fervor that
right. And Iraq became
you didn't question
the
anything.
symbol of that, even though everything that happened took place from Afghanistan. Iraq became the linchpin of all that. Like what was going on in the war of terror, it was very much the Iraq war was centered upon that to the point where when I was in Okinawa, they picked people from Okinawa to go to both of the wars. Like you either went to Iraq or you went to Afghanistan. The people that went to Afghanistan were like, fuck, man. Like, I want to go where the real action was. Like, Afghanistan was like the pussy deployment in 2003, 2004, all the way to 2007 until Marja started getting hot. Yeah, and Sangwin started getting hot. So it was a time where I was just ready to go. When the president was like, let's do it, I joined and I was like, fuck yeah, let's do it. That's the reason why you joined. If you joined as a post 9/11 person, until I would say probably 2012, 2013, your entire purpose, your entire reasoning to do so was most likely to go to war. Like that's the reason why we did it.
Yeah, 9/11. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but even more so, like looking back, 9/11 had nothing to do with Iraq, but we went because the country called you to, like a lot of us say 9/11 is the reason, and it is a big reason why a lot of us joined. But also, there is an allure to going to war, too, that is very attractive to a lot of young people. And that's how I can't speak for everybody, but it certainly was that for me. So I want to look.
I think you're right with that. No, I was just going to say, I think that's a fair sentiment. I don't think you're wrong in saying that. I think some people have a sense of duty, but other people have a sense of, I kind of want to go be involved. Yeah.
And that's a terrible way to say about war is the sense of adventure, but I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Proper Wild. If you suffer from symptoms of ADHD like I do, which includes a little lack of focus, no productivity, your brain is constantly wandering and scattering all across the universe, you have no idea what you're thinking about, and then you're thinking about something else, you need to check out Proper Wild's clean all-day energy shots. Proper Wild uses organic caffeine stacked with some L-theanine, which is clinically proven to show and boost your energy, focus, and productivity without those jitters. No preservatives, no artificial flavors, no artificial sweetenings, no horrible chemicals. Just a natural tasting energy shot with clean ingredients that work. I love it. Been trying it all weekend. I was tired. Dads are always tired. Gave it a little go, and then I was feeling alert, ready to knock out all my honeydew tasks, and I wish they had honeydew melon, but they don't have honeydew melon. But if you want a delicious one, I recommend the strawberry kiwi. It is absolutely fantastic. Give that one a try. You can give it a try by going to properwild.com/barstool to try Proper Wild for 30% off. Today's show is also brought to you by BetterHelp. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. I don't think I'm the same person as I was when I was 18, 19, 20, hell, even 25 years old. I have changed dramatically every 7 to 10 years in my life, and therapy is helping me in that so I can be a better person overall. Therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes We don't know what we want or why we react the way that we do until we go through those things. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. I've been in therapy with BetterHelp for a long time. I say it all the time. That's where I go. It's where my wife goes, where my kids go. We all use BetterHelp and we like it. One of the things that we're upset about is because of licensure that we're going to have to switch therapists when we switch states. I wish I could stay with mine for essentially the remainder of my natural life, but I know that I'm going to be able to find a new one that's great because BetterHelp is awesome. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/0 to get 10% off your first month. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/0.
Well, I feel like Terminal Lance, the white donkey, I feel like that's part of the story, is that in the end, he's like, what did I do this for? He's like, he sees all the destruction, everything that happened. He's like, this is because I wanted a great adventure. Like, and he starts to really look deep within himself, and, you know, it makes him really think. But I do feel like I think it was a good mix of both for many people.
For sure. And that's the reason why today I wanted to go back through some of the information of what happened, because the way that I view it at 40 years old is just vastly different than I did at 21, 22 years old. So I want to go through some of that, and we're going to start with the way that it started. And here's President Bush announcing to the nation that we will be invading Iraq.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign. More than 35 countries are giving crucial support, from the use of naval and air bases, to help with intelligence and logistics, to the deployment of combat units. Every nation in this coalition has chosen to bear the duty and share the honor of serving in our common defense. To all the men and women of the United States Armed Forces now in the Middle East, the peace of a troubled world and the hopes of an oppressed people now depend on you. That trust is well placed. The enemies you confront will come to know your skill and bravery. The people you liberate will witness the honorable and decent spirit of the American military. In this conflict, America faces an enemy who has no regard for conventions of war or rules of morality. Saddam Hussein has placed Iraqi troops and equipment in civilian areas, attempting to use innocent men, women, and children as shields for his own military. A final atrocity against his people. I want Americans and all the world to know that coalition forces will make every effort to spare innocent civilians from harm. A campaign on the harsh terrain of a nation as large as California could be longer and more difficult than some predict. And helping Iraqis achieve a united, stable, and free country will require our sustained commitment. We come to Iraq with respect for its citizens, for their great civilization, and for the religious faiths they practice. We have no ambition in Iraq except to remove a threat and restore control of that country to its own people. I know that the families of our military are praying that all those who serve will return safely and soon. Millions of Americans are praying with you for the safety of your loved ones and for the protection of the innocent. For your sacrifice, you have the gratitude and respect of the American people. And you can know that our forces will be coming home as soon as their work is done. Our nation enters this conflict reluctantly, yet our purpose is sure. The people of the United States and our friends and allies will not live at the mercy of an outlaw regime that threatens the peace with weapons of mass murder. We will meet that threat now with our Army, Air Force, Navy, Coast Guard, and Marines, so that we do not have to meet it later with armies of firefighters and police and doctors on the streets of our cities. Now that conflict has come, the only way to limit its duration is to apply decisive force. And I assure you, this will not be a campaign of half measures, and we will accept no outcome but victory. My fellow citizens, the dangers to our country and the world will be overcome. We will pass through this time of peril and carry on the work of peace. We will defend our freedom. We will bring freedom to others, and we will prevail. May God bless our country and all who defend her.
So I remember sitting in the cafeteria of my college whenever that speech was played on TV. And I remember thinking, oh, fuck, here we go. I didn't curse in my head, but I remember thinking, here we go.
Because you were going to be a priest. You were
right. I was going to be a pastor. I was in seminary to getting ready to go. I was like, there's going to be
fiddlesticks.
Oh, fiddlesticks.
Oh, man.
Probably like
flapjacks.
A big old Cons. I probably said rats.
Yeah, Cons wasn't cussing either. He was kicking rocks. He was so mad.
Rats. Yeah, we're going to do it again. Mm-hmm. So I had all those emotions going on. And I was sitting in the cafeteria thinking about all the people that were going to be coming back. How long was this going to happen? And you remember the sentiment there was going to be a lot like Desert Storm, where we went in on Desert Storm, we whooped the fuck out of everybody, and we were out pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. That's what we thought was going to happen. It was very, very different. So, Kate, I want to take some time and go through the initial timeline. Can you walk us through some of that, please?
Yeah. So in 2002, George Bush, brand new president, and he's arguing that the vulnerability of the U.S. following 9/11, combined with Iraq's alleged possession and manufacture of weapons of mass destruction, later proved false, by the way, its support of terrorist groups, including Al-Qaeda, which was allegedly and proved to be true, responsible for 9/11, made disarming Iraq. He's like, look at all these things they're doing. They kind of became, because I think after 9/11, everyone was looking for who the fuck do we go after?
Right.
They needed a scapegoat. They needed something.
Somebody else needed to spill some blood. It needed to happen.
And I think Iraq, all the factors there made the best case to point there and be like, well, let's put all our effort and energy there. So in 2002, a UN Security Council resolution demanded Iraq comply with UN inspections, get rid of all your fucking weapons, quit fucking around, like everything bad you're doing, cut it out.
Like you were supposed to.
Right. And in early 2003, President Bush and Prime Minister Tony Blair declared Iraq was not cooperating. They still had weapons. They were giving us the runaround. Other world leaders were like, let's extend the inspections, give Iraq a little more time to comply. But by March, Bush was out of patience and he declared an end to diplomacy. He issued an ultimatum to Saddam. And I feel like from Bush's standpoint, like the world is looking to you. What are you going to do? And Iraq's still kind of fucking around a little bit. And like, are you going to take that, or are you going to do something?
Do you remember years later, the same thing happened with President Obama when he had his red line in the sand about both what was going on in Afghanistan and also when Russia initially took Crimea. So he had his red line in the sand and didn't do anything when that happened. And everybody kind of looked at him like a pussy. And George Bush had the red line in the stand and he said, nope, I have my red line. I don't give a fuck. We're going in.
Right. So he declared an end to diplomacy. He issued an ultimatum to Saddam Hussein, giving the Iraqi president 48 hours to leave Iraq. Leaders in France, Germany, Russia, other countries objected to this buildup towards war, including longtime British Parliament members. People were saying, like, war is very bad and very serious. Let's really, really, really make sure. But he's like, no, I got my line in the sand.
And this sentiment, and that's the reason why I put this in here, this sentiment from this individual parliament member, his feelings about it that he said when they were voting if we should go into Iraq or not. Listen to how spot on he was 20 years later. Here he is.
War is an easy thing to talk about. There are not many people of the generation that remember it. The right honourable gentleman served with distinction in the last war. I never killed anyone, but I wore uniform. But I was in London in the Blitz in 1940, living in the Millbank Tower where I was born. Some different ideas have come in since. And every night I went down to the shelter in Thames House. Every morning I saw Dockland burning. 500 people were killed in Westminster one night by a landmine. It was terrifying. Aren't Arabs terrified? Aren't Iraqis terrified? Don't Arab and Iraqi women weep when their children die? Doesn't bombing strengthen their determination? What fools we are to live in a generation for which war is a computer game for our children and just an interesting little Channel 4 news item. Every member of Parliament tonight who votes for the government motion will be consciously and deliberately accepting the responsibility for the deaths of innocent people if the war begins, as I fear it will. Now, that's for their decision to take. But this is a quite unique debate in my parliamentary experience, where we're asked to share responsibility for a decision we won't really be taking, with consequences for people who have no part to play in the brutality of the regime which we are dealing with. And I finish with this. On October the 24th, 1945, and the former Prime Minister from Bexley, Old Sidcup, will remember it, the United Nations Charter was passed. And the words of that charter are etched into my mind and move me even as I think of them. We, the people of the United Nations, determined to save future generations, succeeding generations, from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has caused untold suffering to mankind. That was the pledge of that generation to this generation, and it would be the greatest betrayal of all if we voted to abandon the Charter and take unilateral action and pretend we were doing it in the name of the international community. And I shall vote against the motion for the reasons that I've given the House.
And he was right. He was right to the point where we all look back and we're like, I don't know if that was the right thing to do. I don't know many people now. Do you guys? I don't know many people that at this point are like, the war in Iraq was justified. Do you guys know anybody that's like that fought there? I think we understand the reason why we did it and what we were told. But looking back, even with hindsight, I don't know many people that thought it was a justified war. Do you, Cons?
I don't think that's fair to do. I think you can look back, but we have the luxury of that hindsight, and we have the luxury of all the information we've gathered over the last 20 years that we didn't have in 2003. And I think if you take the facts as they were in 2003, I got it. The intel that we were provided ended up being incorrect. There ended up being no weapons of mass destruction. But to what you guys were saying, President Bush made a statement. Saddam Hussein, who, notable bad dude.
Still a very bad guy, yeah.
Still, I think everyone agrees, was a very bad person.
If we would have went in and just killed him, like once he died, if we would have left then, I think the entire narrative of what happened in Iraq changes. I really do.
I think when you ask, like, is it, I think in the big picture was the whole thing, the way it escalated, the way, what was it, that part justified? And I look at Afghanistan the same, like, and I'm like, no. And I also find it very hard to believe that the people at the very, very, very top who had all the best information truly believed. And I feel like tinfoil hat Katie, there were people that knew that this was getting, a lot of things were getting kind of falsified or tweaked to make the public go along with it. I truly believe that.
There's parts of that I think could be accurate. Like, I think that there's parts of it, but the part Colin Powell gets shit on all the time because he was the one that made the speech as a Secretary of State when he went to the UN. From what I know about his character and what I've seen from his character throughout the years, there is no fucking chance he makes that speech as bombastically, as emphatically as he did without thinking that this intelligence is perfect, it's sound, it's what I advise the President of the United States to do with troops that I'm in charge of or have been in charge of, with troops that I cared for already in multiple conflicts that he had been in himself.
Not to mention, we're 18 months removed from 9/11 at that point. Everybody is on heightened awareness. Do you want to be the one who has an opportunity to go and affect some positive change in this country, in Iraq, and take out Saddam, have that opportunity and not take it? Because again, hindsight is 2020. What if we had never gone into Iraq? What then? What could Saddam Hussein have done to his people? Could he have developed weapons of mass destruction? I don't know. Maybe.
And there was certainly chemical weapon use that was going on.
Yeah.
I guess I'm more talking about the way we got bogged down for
sure. And we'll get into that some, but I want to set the scene a little bit. Let's move forward in the timeline.
Fair enough. So, he issues the ultimatum. He's like, you got 48 hours to get out.
Get out.
Okay. And Saddam says, no, I'm heading into a hidey hole, my friends. I'm going to hidey holes all over this town.
Yep. Call that
So-
spider hole.
Saddam refuses to leave Iraq, and U.S. and allied forces launch an attack on the morning of March 20th. And it began when U.S. aircraft dropped several precision-guided bombs on a bunker believed to be where the Iraqi president was with senior staff. This was followed by, what's the term? What was everybody buzzing about? We all remember
Shock
seeing it
and
on
awe.
TV. Shock and awe, motherfuckers.
And
Shock
it was.
And it worked because I was like, let's fucking go. I remember
Right.
watching it in high school and being like, America, fuck
Yeah.
Europe.
I mean, Baghdad lit up like that when that time in San Diego when all the fireworks went off at the same exact time in like 15 seconds. Like that's what it looked. The entire skyline is red.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and these were directed against government and military installations. Within days, U.S. forces had invaded Iraq from Kuwait in the south, and U.S. special forces were already a dabbling up north. They were already up there. Despite fears that Iraqi forces would engage in like a scorched earth, they're just going to destroy everything and burn all the bridges, get rid of all the... they didn't do that for the most part.
And they
Iraqi
did
troops-
it in Desert Storm. Like that's the reason why
Right.
we were scared because they did it.
But for the most part, Iraqi troops simply chose not to resist the advance of coalition forces. Coalition casualties had been light in the initial 2003 combat, with about 150 deaths by May 1st. However, deaths of U.S. troops soared afterwards, reaching 1,000 by the presidential election in November of 2004, surpassing 3,000 in early 2007. You have the first and second battles of Fallujah, where that was especially intense, as you guys know. In addition, several hundred soldiers from other coalition countries killed. And we're also leaving out, which always gets left out, the immense number of contractors. Both contractors we hired to come into the U.S. from third world countries, second world countries, whatever, and our own U.S. contractors. The number of Iraqis who died during the conflict is uncertain, but one estimate made in 2006 put the total at more than 650,000.
In 2006. Like that number.
So it
we
wasn't
kept,
even
we
done
kept
yet,
going for
yeah.
another 6 years. 650,000 Iraqis by 2006. Like that's not a number I knew. When I was in,
No.
asked me, I would have been like, there's a poll at the top of this sheet that we're doing where it was a poll conducted of British citizens about how many Iraqi citizens were killed in there. And 59% of Britons thought that fewer than 10,000 Iraqis have died. And the true figure at that time was 500,000. If that happens in any other country or amongst any other allies, we call that propaganda. Like it is propaganda at the highest order because the governments of both us and the UK, we both knew those numbers and we didn't tell anybody. That's propaganda by the definition.
Yeah, and if you look this up yourself to find your own numbers, there's a range, but it's hundreds of thousands from pretty much every side of the fence, hundreds of thousands. Speaking of this, again, this is by 2006. That December, back in 2003, we found Saddam Hussein in the hidey hole, was sitting in jail, had his trial, and he was executed in December of 2006. And at this point, then you're like, okay, things maybe can start winding down. Not the case.
And then Bush could have flown his mission accomplishment banner again, and it would have been right that time.
Right. But instead, violence and casualties continued to mount. More Americans began to criticize the Bush administration for what they perceived to be the mishandling of the occupation. Because at this point, it's like, all right, people are starting to be like, well, okay, what's the plan here? What are we doing? Because our troops are coming home in caskets, and what's happening here? The appearance in the news then of photographs at Abu Ghraib prison, that was a huge thing. People are like, what are we doing over there? And
as
then
a dog handler there, like the amount of training that you had to go through after that and what happened, because what those people
as a result,
did was fucking terrible. So dog handlers were at a lot of the center because a lot of the people from Iraq were terrified of dogs in general. And then dogs that were trained to attack was a whole different level. And there was times where I was there when people were like, hey, we're going to do some interrogations. Can you bring your dog in? And after all that training, luckily I had it, because if I hadn't had it, I would have been like, sure, yeah, it's a force multiplier. Let's do it. But luckily I had all that training and I was like, fuck no, that's a war crime. I'm not doing that shit.
Yeah. And so my question is, like, as you think of it now, but like, okay, Saddam Hussein is dead. The Iraqi troops didn't put up much resistance at first. But why does it keep asking? Like, is it Saddam's buddies then who are still trying to take over? Is it Al-Qaeda? Like, who were you guys fighting at this point? Like, what was that? Like, what?
I mean, that's what I wrote a blog this morning about it, and we're recording on Monday, obviously. I wrote a blog then, and General Mattis has a doctrine where he says that you cannot send troops to combat if they do not have an articulable mission that they can accomplish. We didn't have one. Like a lot of times, Cons, and I'm sure you remember because we were in Iraq basically at the same time. Where I was in Fallujah, the entire mission of a lot of us was just to be drawn out to get shot at. For what purpose, though? Like what in World War II, your objective was to kill Hitler, to make the Nazi regime go away, and to completely dismantle that type of ideology. They did that. In 2003, we were assigned to kill or completely displace Saddam Hussein. In 2006, that was accomplished. The same exact thing happened in Afghanistan. The mission was to find and kill Al-Qaeda members who were hiding in Afghanistan and to kill Osama bin Laden. If both of those things happen, you leave when bin Laden dies and you leave when Hussein dies, everybody looked at the war on terror completely different because it was justified to go in those places to kill bin Laden and to kill Saddam Hussein. I think it was justified, but the way that we did it and kept doing it.
Well, I think that's where you asked, like, what was our mission at that point once both those figureheads are gone, was that vacuum that you might leave if you did just abruptly leave our occupation there. And I will say, like, I knew from just the missions that I was doing on the border of Iraq and Iran, we were still cognizant and aware of, for lack of a better word, bad guys that were coming into Iraq from Iran.
Yeah.
In trying to establish footholds in Iraq where they could operate out of I can't speculate to go from there to where, to other parts of the world or the country, but it was seen as a stronghold.
So it's kind of like the COIN mission in Afghanistan where, okay, we got the bad guys out and now this is phase 2. It seems like 2006, 2007 is phase 2, counterinsurgency, where the plan was to build up the Iraqi people and the Iraqi government enough that the bad guys couldn't come in and become that government again, which sounds great. But in practice, my God, it's just such a massive
And no one's ever done it in the history of the world that I know of, have gone in, completely done a regime change, entered democracy, and then there was no problems afterwards. Like, but that just doesn't happen.
It would be to do all that, Cons, and then just dip with, you know what I mean? So I get that part. I understand that. Anyways, so 2006, President Bush indicated inclination to increase the number of troops in Iraq. And finally, in January 2007,
also known as the surge.
Yeah, President Bush added more than 20,000 troops in an effort known as Chaps has said, the surge. Despite heavy casualties initially, 2007 was the deadliest year for U.S. forces since 2004. The drop in violence that occurred that year was a source of encouragement. It's like, see, that was rough at first, but things are getting better. In October 2010, the whistleblowing organization WikiLeaks published more than 400,000 secret U.S. military documents from the Iraq War online under the title Iraq War Log. Documents revealed day-to-day information about conduct over in Iraq. It indicated that U.S. forces kept detailed accounts of Iraqi civilian casualties, which they had been saying to the public, like, we're not sure, but they knew exactly how many civilians were being killed, and at a much higher rate than the public was being told. Private military contractors were often involved in incidents of excessive force, and that we've seen stories about that come out over and over.
Blackwater and all that shit.
Yeah, and then Iran provided extensive direct military aid to Shia militias participating in Iraq's sectarian conflict, and that U.S. forces ignored widespread use of torture by Iraqi security forces. U.S. and Iraqi officials condemned the publications of the document, saying this is going to set back our efforts and endanger the lives of military personnel and Iraqis who cooperated with the military.
And I don't think that has anything to do with the documents. Like the WikiLeaks documents, I don't think affected the American people at all. It was the videos. Just like it is when an NFL player or whoever beats their wife or beats their girlfriend. It's not reading a newspaper article that you're like, holy shit, it's still very bad. But when you see the video of it happening, it takes a whole different area. So when you see people that are kids, or like some of the videos where they were kids, or it was around a school or around a hospital, and there's 500-pound drops on them, and you could see it from the drone footage, that's when you're like, holy shit, man. Like, this is fucking bad. Like, I don't know how to really articulate it, like how bad it was, but feeling it, even as somebody was there, made me feel fucking sick when you see some of the places that we bombed.
Yeah. And then the date for withdrawal set negotiations was 2008. Well, fast forward to 2011, we're still there. U.S. military announces that Iraq and the U.S. had started negotiations to keep several thousand soldiers there past that December. U.S. presence in Iraq remained unpopular with the Iraq public and several Iraqi political factions. Negotiations failed when the two sides were unable to reach an agreement. In October, President Obama announced that the remaining 39,000 soldiers would leave by the end of 2011, and the U.S. formally declared an end to its mission in a ceremony in Baghdad in December 15th, 2011.
There was probably a sheet cake there, too.
Sheet cake. We are still there, though. There's still 2,500 troops and who knows how many contractors in the country, and U.S. commanders don't expect that to change. I was wondering, 2011, like, when that ended for you guys and you saw like mission accomplished and all that stuff. Well, mission accomplished was even before that. But how
that was in 2003.
You guys...
That was in May of 2003.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, God. Okay, so I'm way off on that. Yikes. But when we finally withdrew from Iraq, sort of, for the most part, did you guys feel the same level of like punch to the gut I felt when we left Afghanistan? Like, what did you guys feel?
Well, before I answer that, I want to go back a little bit to answer that. Like, because what I've said so far very much makes me look like an anti-war hippie liberal and shit like that. I do not feel bad about any person that I was around that was killed. Like, as far as the enemy goes, do not feel bad. I believe the intelligence that was there. I saw what they were doing. And that's the one benefit of having positive identification.
And what were they doing? Like,
sight.
What was...
Putting IEDs in, doing things like that, taking and kidnapping children, going into torture houses. They deserve to die.
Yeah. And I'm just asking as someone,
so,
you know, you only know your own war better.
Like, the whole
curious.
effort as a whole. Like, I think you can look at the whole thing and say the whole thing was bad. The individual pieces, the people that I were involved in killing them, I do not feel bad because I know what the rules of engagement were. I know that we had to have positive identifications that they were doing. One, they were doing torture. They're about to kill somebody, or they are placing ID. And they had to have a weapon. And that weapon had to be pointed at you in order to take a shot. Because of those things, and simply because of the rules of engagement, I don't feel intensely bad about what I personally did. I would do it again. All those people deserve to die again and again and again.
I feel the exact same way because guess what? The bullet that went in Chaps' arm, that was very real. Okay.
Yeah.
The shrapnel that hit my buddies and took some of their lives. That was real. So I won't apologize. And I'm never going to take
I'm not asking anyone to apologize.
I know that.
Oh, okay.
No, I know. But what I'm just saying broadly for the audience is I understand that we have all this information now in 2023, but we were operating with the information that we had then. And we, by and large, all followed, as Chap said, the rules of engagement, and we were engaging with people who were looking to do harm on other humans. So I won't ever apologize for having gone over there. And I think anybody who wants to look back at our time in Iraq, and granted, you can take it and learn from it, just like we have in every conflict, and you can point to the parts that were bad and then the parts where we screwed up because we're not perfect. But I don't enjoy, or I don't support anybody who wants to look back and just completely, excuse my language, shit all over it and our time there. And I think that's what some people are doing. And that angers me, because if they're going to shit all over this and what we did in Iraq, then that means all my friends who were killed and were ultimately affected, for the ones that did come home for the rest of their lives, that was all in vain. No, I don't believe that, not even for a second. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a little upset about this.
No, that's
because
you have every right to.
I think too often people want to criticize President Bush's decisions, President Obama's decisions, and I think that's absolute horseshit. Okay, that's absolute horseshit, because they didn't have the information. They didn't have the luxury of 20 years down the line. So I think it's a cheap shot to take it, either of those men and all the leadership within our military that served during that time, and anybody who wore a uniform and went over to Iraq in the last 20 years.
I understand what you're saying, Cons. There's an element that I disagree with. I believe fully of what you said about every single troop that was there. You were a first lieutenant when you were there. I was a corporal and a sergeant when I was there. I had no idea higher level intelligence or anything like that. I think because of the position that people like President Bush and President Obama, they have to be held to account. Even if it wasn't the right thing at the time, I think that you have to look back at that with hindsight bias being 2020.
You can look back. Yeah, absolutely. You can look back and say, all right, now that we have all this information, you might have done things differently. I get that. But I'm saying in the moment with the decisions that they made, given who was advising them, because also, let's not act like President Bush or President Obama were unilaterally making decisions. They had a lot of people advising them. So I think...
And it was a clear indication, not only there, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, every single intelligence agency across the board was like, yes, there's definitely weapons of mass destruction. All these different things are happening. So I understand why we went in. But looking back, I would say that the individual service member, the individual person that was boots on the ground, and I'm not even talking higher echelons of general officers and shit like that. I'm talking primarily lieutenant colonel and below. They did what they were asked to do because they believed in the mission. Like they did. They believed in it.
That's what I think. That's what gets me, is that level that you're talking about, and all the troops went into it with the 99.99999% of troops went into that with the best intentions for their country. I know I did. I know you did. I know you did. I think there was a level of knowledge at some point when we started getting into the quagmire realm in both Iraq and Afghanistan that bad choices were made. And I don't care if I sound crazy. A lot of people had a lot of money to make. And I feel like the wrong choices were made for the wrong reasons. And you talk about our troops and friends who have been affected by that. We're the ones who live with that now. And they're fine. Like, I think I'm so disillusioned at this point.
No, I think you're fair in saying that, though, because I'm not Pollyanna. I'm not Pollyanna, like everything the military does is just.
No, I know.
Listen, I know that there was a lot of money made from 2001 till present day.
Man, if you could go back, wouldn't you invest in like Hesco Barrier Company?
Yes.
And like whoever makes sandbags,
Otis
Spunkmeyer muffins,
Raytheon,
porta potty companies,
lumber companies. Oh my God, tent makers, all that shit. My God, I have a couple good things about the war in Iraq as someone who didn't serve in it. The music.
Oh yeah.
Okay. American Idiot. Didn't love that song so much, but that's the one, chaps. I'll put a boot up your ass. It's the American way.
And Uncle Sam put his name at the top of his tits.
What band more than any other, speaking of war profiteers, what band more than any other profited off the war in Iraq?
3 Doors Down.
No, close.
Who?
I'll give you a clue.
Oh,
you're watching a drone strike.
Yeah,
bodies hit the.
That was the initial ZBT song. Remember, Cons, when it was "Careless Whisper" into "Let the Bodies Hit the Floor." Yeah.
I just want to ask you guys, like, do you have any other thought, like the 20-year, the anniversary? Like, what are you feeling? Like, I wanted to know what you felt when we pulled out in 2011. Like, do you feel any type of way, Cons? Like, do you have any thoughts going through your head today, or feeling heavy, or it's like, no, I think
by and large, all of those feelings I had, I guess it was 2 years ago on the anniversary, the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And I kind of closed that chapter of my life then. Cause I kind of rightly or wrongly lumped this all together, both of the conflicts all together. But I would just say that at our level, like Chap said, I was in the Army. I was given a mission, and I did the best of my ability to execute that mission, to bring all of my soldiers home. And that was what was important to me.
And you should be proud of that.
So,
and I want to say on your behalf, Cons, There is a vast difference from what I went through as a corporal and sergeant to what Cons is talking about. My charge was absolutely not to bring everybody home. My charge, and I talked about this, about what the Sergeant Major of Marine Corps said and what's on the back of his coin: mission accomplishment and then troop welfare. That's the way that we look at it. The commanding officers, the commanders, the platoon leaders, they don't, because it's not going to be me that's knocking on a mom's door. It's just not.
Yeah.
And I think about that. I think about the responsibility that we put on a
How old were you? How old were you?
I was 23 when I went to Iraq, and my oldest NCO was 35. So
I think people forget that too. Like, you were 23 years old, and look at the mission you were like,
yeah.
And look at what you accomplished. Like,
and it's crazy, because I think at 23, luckily I had so many people to remind me, so many great NCOs, like, listen, you don't know everything. We're going to follow you, but you don't know everything. And you keep that in the back of your mind. But I look at it now as a 38-year-old man at 23, and it's like, you didn't know anything, man. Mm-hmm. You could have, the best training, read all the books, the best NCOs, but still you're operating with that 23-year-old brain, and it's not fully formed yet. So the charge that we put, and not just officers, NCOs who put in leadership position at young ages too, because I had freaking
it's just not
20-year-old E5s. Yeah, I know it's not the same.
If I'm saying that shit, and like, it's just not the same.
Yeah,
no, yeah,
yeah, because
level
ultimately,
of pressure.
You're right, and I that was my greatest fear, was having to tell someone's mother or sister or wife that I've screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And those pressures, they don't go away. And those feelings of, still now, and I wrote about it this morning, thinking about putting Dustin onto a helicopter.
Yeah.
At 23. Like, your friends that are completely eviscerated from rockets or mortars or IEDs. And you know what's going on inside that body bag. And you have to put somebody on a bird, send them back to their mom, and then 48 hours or less than, you're back on the road. You're not recovering. You're not doing any therapy. All that shit was for pussies at the time. You need to sack up, Marine, and get the fuck back out there. And that
mission continues.
And that's the way that's the way war has always been, and it's the way that war will always be. But that doesn't make it any easier. And walking through those streets and seeing people, it changed my entire worldview. And I don't think that's hindsight. I think when I was there, looking around people, like you said, I was in seminary before I went. And I was a firm believer in what I used to quote all the time: I am the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes to the Father except through me. John 14. I thought that to a T, and that meant anybody. You don't get there anywhere. So I looked around at these people that were suffering, and I thought, these people, no one can come to the Father except through me. These people don't ever hear. So that child over there that's going to grow up is going to go to hell. Like, it completely changed the way that I look at the world.
I think it changed a lot of people, the way a lot of people, we were all so young, and we're in these experiences. Final question for me: is there anything that you can look at, Cons, and say, like, here's some really good things that came out of this for me? Like,
absolutely. My friendship with my buddy Rob, who I didn't meet in college, met while I was serving. The great experience, and I think kind of what Chaps is saying, that perspective, the perspective I gained on the world that I think a lot of people never come to realize, and most don't realize until they're much older. So the fact that I was experiencing that and I gained that perspective, I think really shaped just how I view the world and how I approach life in general. And I think ultimately made me a better person. And I like to think I was always a very selfless person and gave myself up to others. But I think the honor I feel having served in the military, in the Army, and going to Iraq in the face of the unknown, the face of danger, and doing that, And no one can ever take that from me. So
Mhm.
I'll wear that with pride. And I
As you
think
should.
about, I'm going to be a father, and the pride I'll feel to be able to tell my child that.
Hmm.
That's all positive.
Right. I completely
Definitely.
agree, Cons. And there is a time, and there's always a time, that America needs rough men and women ready to stand and ready to march to the sounds of the guns. And we've done that.
Well, as corny as it sounds, thank you both for your service.
But that doesn't change. That doesn't change some of the aspects of what we saw and how that will affect us. Khan's talking about some of the positive things of pride, and I completely agree with that. The pride of having the courage to do what your country needs you to do, or what you assume and believe that your country needs you to do, to walk into a war zone, to know what it feels like when a C-130 or a C-5, C-7 is about to land and they have to turn the red lights on so you don't get shot at. All of those different things, of the level of fear and learning how to overcome that and have a positive outlook no matter what. Sitting underneath a stairwell covered in my own blood, I knew my kids would think of me as brave, even though I was fucking terrified. But courage is not the absence of fear. It's moving forward in the face of fear. And we have our memories. We have stolen those memories from what some say is 1 million Iraqis. And that's something that has to be reckoned with as well.
Well,
and I'm not sure I ever will. It's the dichotomy of the service member.
It's a mind fuck. It's truly what it is. You have
knowing that the people that were to your left or right there, you were responsible to them. And then knowing years later, the destruction that you helped cause in the wake of everything that goes along with that destruction. I don't know if you can marry the two, but I think that's the plight of the service member. And it's the reason why things like PTS exist, because you cannot balance those. As much as you try, as much therapy as you go through, they will never be completely wrapped up together where you have full peace. There's going to be elements of that peace, but full peace, I think it's impossible to ever achieve for the warfighter. I really do.
I think that's like what Khan's saying. You have to, the truth of it is you didn't know, and you were doing the best fucking possible thing that you thought you could do. And
it sucks telling your own story without the Iraq part. Like we spent probably 40 minutes or however long this is talking about the way that it impacted us and the way that it impacted our friends. And so much, I know that the outside looking in from anybody who didn't participate is like, you got to look at the Iraqi cause. And we want to. But in reality, if Khans and I and Kate for Afghanistan, if we sat and thought about all of that all the time, you would be a wreck of a human being. You can't do it.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to function.
Yeah, right. It's too much.
And so eventually, like Khan says, at that 20 years, you have to try your best to put it aside. And I think a lot of times we do, until there's moments like this, until there's moments of something that reminded us of that. Right.
But it makes you reflect.
It'll always be tough.
I just am thinking we have a lot of Iraq vets who listen to the show. And if you are feeling any certain kind of way, if you have any thoughts, if you think Tinfoil Hat Katie is completely off base, hit us up.
Even if you want to vent, man, like if you
just want to vent,
if you want to go and write me the world's longest message DM, I'll read that motherfucker and I'll respond to you. If you want to tell me about some of the shitty situations or what you're struggling through, and I'm sure the rest of you would the same thing. If you want to talk to us about it, we're here for you. Like even if you just want to vent, not like mental health shit, but I think just venting and talking to somebody like Sebastian Unger's tribe. We're the tribe together. And there's bigger tribes. There's a big tribe. And then there's the local tribe that you have. And I feel like us and our listeners are our own little tribe. So if you want to talk to us, we're here for you.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll say to anybody who served in Iraq and Afghanistan is I don't think you should ever feel like you have to apologize. You did what your country asked you to do. I'm not saying that there weren't bad things that came out of Iraq and Afghanistan, but you did what you were called upon to do. And for that, I don't think you can ever apologize, nor should you.
Completely
So
agree.
I think sometimes people might have trouble reconciling with that. Like when you do have now this lens to look back and you're like, Jesus,
Yeah.
but don't ever apologize. And I know we all, we kind of joke like, oh, thank you for your service. But yeah, I think
I am grateful
we're
there's
a
people like you
generation
out there who stepped up. I am grateful
I think,
there's
but I
people
think
also.
it's proud that and you guys are a part of this. We're part of a generation. The country called on the military to go and help the world, and maybe that's a little grandiose, but the generation
That's what we
before us
thought.
didn't have that. Yeah,
That's what we thought we were doing. So,
And I will say
yeah.
the last thing before we get into save rounds, when World War II folks came back, they swore never again. 15 years later, we were in Korea for a war that had really essentially nothing to do with the United States. 20 years after that, we were in Vietnam. 20 years after that, we were in Iraq and Afghanistan. We cannot allow that to happen in the next 20. Like that cannot, on our watch, the quagmires cannot return. And I think that's got to be what we take away. Our experiences should shape policy. And I'm not saying that it's the World War II generation's fault or Korean War generation's fault. One, because they didn't have the outlets of communication like we do now. The ability to talk to the American public, to share our individual stories, to have those published far and wide on podcasts and blogs like ours or wherever we're writing, and doesn't have to come from just the mainstream media. We can have our own voices about what we're seeing, and that's a responsibility that we have to take serious, or it'll be
Saved rounds, anyone?
my 10-year-old or my 10-year-old. Let's go to save rounds. All right, on a much more positive note, let's switch to some save rounds and alibis. Catherine, we'll start with you, my friend.
I'm feeling good.
Just switching over to some fun stuff.
Hey, it was my son's second birthday over the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And that was fun. My parents came up for the morning, got him a remote control dune buggy that's supposed to flip over and keep going every time it hits the wall.
Oh, yeah.
He hated it, and he cried and screamed and begged to be picked up. And so that was fun. What else?
No, you can't bury the lead about his birthday. Roller coaster goofing in your living room?
That's right. His aunt sent him one of those roller coaster things that I'm in a small apartment. This thing takes up like the entire thing, but he loves it. And it's one of those things he just keeps going in a circle so I can finally sit down and eat lunch. I'm like, yeah, again, keep going, buddy. That's awesome.
Oh, nice.
Wow. So it's great. I got him a bicycle, which is probably way too advanced for a 2-year-old, but
what is
don't
it,
they
a
have those
Strider
bikes?
It's like a Strider bike. Yeah, it has no pedals, but it's like a real ass bike. And so we started practicing with that, which means my back is killing me today. So I spent all day in the hallway hunched over in like a candy cane shape, pushing him up and down the hall. But just really fun that he's 2. I
wonder what the advantage is to those bikes versus a bike with training wheels.
One is because they figure out the balancing on their own and they don't become reliant on the wheels. So when they go to side, so they'll like basically go like a little skateboard and eventually they can figure out that they can glide. Yeah, they get the balance.
Yeah. A lot of them, then you can add the pedals to them afterwards, kind of thing. So, yeah, very excited to be hunched over. I'm trying to think if I have anything else crazy exciting going on.
I was upset when I saw the roller coaster thing because I knew that the John Deere tractor was getting tossed to the side. It was needs to be like the Toy Story thing, just given to a different daycare.
You're wrong. It fits on the roller coaster.
Oh.
He's actually been preferring that.
Yes,
so just so
double
you know.
up. Love that.
Yeah. But that's about it for me. Nothing crazy. Cons?
Oh, this year. This past weekend, I celebrated my 1-year anniversary being married, which was crazy. Not really sure where a year went. It flew by. A lot happened. A lot going to be happening in year 2. So I'm very much looking forward to all of that. on
That was the
Friday-
most casual way to say that I'm buying a house in Jersey and having my first child.
Having a baby.
Like, there's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff coming up this year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
this
a
year
lot,
could
Cons,
potentially
yeah.
be pretty big, I'd say.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, big year.
We'll see how that all goes. Yeah. No, I tell you what. I mean, it's certainly very real. It's very real when we go to the doctor's appointments, but I find myself oftentimes forgetting that I am going to have a child, and we're
Mhm.
going to have a child. Not I, we are going to have a child come July. I don't know. It's very odd, and that I'm not thinking about it as much as I am. I don't know if that makes me a bad person or
Nah.
if that's normal. I don't know.
You'll
So,
get there when you get there.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Um,
I still can't believe I'm a parent. Like, holy
Good.
shit, who's this guy? What the
In
hell?
2 months, I will have an 18-year-old. Like, that shit feels insane. Like, because I'm
You're
still
gonna
pretty
miss
young.
this. You're gonna want this back.
I
You're
know.
gonna wish these days didn't go by so fast. You're gonna.
All right,
okay,
so-
that's singing. That made me think. I just started watching on Prime.
On
Daisy,
flies. That's
Mhm.
what I'm
Daisy
saying.
Jones and the Six. I highly recommend that. I'm 3 episodes into that. Love it.
Wait, Casey Jones from Ninja Turtles?
No, Daisy Jones.
Oh.
Daisy, like the
I
I
flower.
was like,
Daisy Jones.
how do
and
I
the
not
Six.
know about a Casey Jones Netflix show?
It's a show based on a novel, and the novel is loosely based on Fleetwood Mac. So if you go into it with that context, it's pretty good. And then finally on Friday was our People's Day. It was St. Patrick's Day. And let me tell you, I got a bone to pick with old Sleepy Joe, President
Oh.
Biden.
Oh, wow.
He said he's not really Irish because he's sober and he doesn't have any relatives in jail. And I take offense to that.
Wow.
Yeah, you didn't see that?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, clearly he meant it as a joke, but I take offense to that because, listen, that is derogatory against the great people of Ireland who came to this country and built this country with their bare hands. The Irish built this country. So for him to disparage his own people, his own heritage in that way, I was disgusted and appalled.
Wow. I mean,
As you
from
should
what
be.
I know of the Irish, they're not easily offended. So if Cons is offended, buddy,
Yeah.
Joe
Come on.
he needs to give an apology big time.
Mhm.
That's
Definitely.
two
Apology
presidents that owe people apologies on this show.
Yeah. So that's all I got.
So I have been doing a lot more hiking, doing a lot more
I
activating.
saw.
I've been going to the little parks around. Yesterday, I did like 7 miles, and that's a lot for me at this point.
That's
like I'm
great.
old going through, and it's like rocky terrain going up and down and up and down it's hills, but they're pretty big hills, and everything
Yeah.
was wet. Dude, I had the other day, I'm calling it chunk foot. So I was going into my house, up the stairs from my office into my house, and there was a huge gust of wind that happened from inside the house, and it led all the way. You know, when it like makes the door slam and you didn't even
Yeah.
touch it. That happened as I was walking into my house, and the door went right on my heel and took like a
Ooh.
big chunk of the back of my heel out. Bleeding pretty bad, but I just put like a Band-Aid on it. Shit was fine. So my wife was very excited about going hiking. And I was like, well, I got these brand new hiking boots. I want to go too. And then we get there and we start going longer than we should. And, you know, whenever something happens to your feet, you kind of overcompensate, like the way that your
Yes.
foot hits the ground.
Yeah.
And I was very much going to the inside of my foot instead of the outside and walking more on my toes than on my heel to like give it some rest. That was a fucking mistake. Like my leg this morning, I feel like I got bit by a shark. Like it
Yeah.
is like
Hiking
going up.
in new boots is always tough anyway.
Yeah, and then having that, I like looked down at my sock when I took it off. It was all covered in blood. I was screaming for a foreman to bring me some moleskin. And then my wife had the audacity. I said, I should have brought some moleskin out here. She was like, I don't think it's called moleskin. I was like, first of all, how dare you? If there's anything that I know about, it's moleskin.
Moleskin.
Moleskin is what I know. So if you have chunk foot, you're going out for a little hike this weekend, I recommend putting some moleskin in your red
Truly.
backpack along
Mhm.
with the water. That'll make it a lot better time. Other than that, Kelsey's going to be 18. Like I said, we're doing more driving. She was scared to drive for a long time. We're doing highway driving. We're doing all this
Hell
kind
yeah.
of stuff. She's gotten a lot better. And I was like,
Good.
babe, it's fucking time. Just schedule it. I'm tired of taking you places. Aren't you sick of riding your scooter when it's 30 degrees outside? Just go take your fucking test. I got that car for her when she was 15 years old on her 15th birthday. She's almost 18. It's time. I am sick of driving her to the movies and shit like that. And those days they're coming to an end. And then I'll probably be sad. I'll be a sad boy.
Yeah, you're like, I wish I had her to drive me.
You're gonna want this
Cats in the
bike.
cradle and the silver
gonna wish
spoon.
these
A little boy blue and the man
go
on the
by
moon.
so fast. You're gonna.
Kate, is that an actual song or just something?
Oh
you're just
yeah,
making up?
oh buddy, yes, it's a song.
Who sings that? You know?
No, I don't. This, you're gonna. Everyone keep talking. I'm gonna Google it.
Is that just like Creed?
No, it's
country.
It's like the baby is crying and you're tired and you're saying bang, bang, but
Travis
you're gonna
Tritt?
miss
No.
this. Trace Adkins.
Trace Atkins.
Oh,
He's
friend
been
of
on
the
the show
program.
before. Got shot in the ass by his wife.
That's right. He was an absolute delight. Great guy.
Mhm.
Didn't even want to talk about it. What a fucking hero he is.
I know.
Yeah.
All right, sound the retreat.